sort of an extension of you just playing out.
So how much of actually forming Warsaw, forming your first band, you know, was motivated by the music, and how much of it was motivated by the girls and being on stage and the attention that you probably get?
There wasn't any girls.
It was the ethic, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was like
I could do that.
Yeah, freedom thing. You just, I mean, it wasn't musical, to be honest, because I think even when Steve came on board with Bernard and me and Ian, we never said, we just wanted to be punks, didn't we? We didn't.
It was anti-music, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, we didn't say
it's against like 25-minute solos and all that lot. It was just get up there, do it when we learn. 15 minutes, get off again.
Were you punks by definition? You know, by the dictionary definition of punk, with the and the safety pins and the...
Yeah.
That's professional punks. We're
right.
Sort of part-time
punks. Yeah.
But I think you sort of grew out of the fashion thing quickest, really. I don't know. I mean, it seems weird now when you see the photographs of yourself.
Wasn't it? Rather than like a lifestyle thing.
I mean, and the thing it gave us was it gave us freedom from working for a living, and as we were, you know, saying to Jules Holland last night.
Celebrity name dropping, aren't you?
That's a nice one.
It's a great way of not having a job.
So, you know, you formed Warsaw, who went on to become Joy Division, who in hindsight have often been described in the annuals as post-punk. Did you realise that you were doing something that was taking what you were listening to one step further?
All those things are just labels. Like at the time, you know, we said we were new wave, and then we even got humped in with goths at one point, didn't we? No, couldn't see that at all.
I mean, I suppose if you look at the greatest thing that we've achieved is the fact that the music's lasted right from Ideal for Living to now, and you know, it still sounds current. It's kept its place, which is, I presume, why bands look at you as being respectable.
Well, before semi, pre, post new wave punk modern music, and even pre-punk, there was Iggy Pop.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, and he's widely considered as the godfather of punk rock, even though he probably looks much better even to this day than his great-great-great-great-grandchildren.
I mean, my part, he sang it with people who were going on about Iggy and the Stooges.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's a made-up group, that Iggy and the Stooges, he made that up. And I was in Kendall's, and I saw the first Stooges album. I thought, I'll have to buy this just to prove it's not a made-up group name thing. And it was the thickest record. I still own it to this day, and it's still the thickest record, you know, like vinyl. Yeah. It's massive. Oof. And he put it on, and it was like, bloody hell, that's the loudest thing I've ever heard. 1969, I Want to Be Your Dog. And that was really punk, before punk, really. Like the Stooges, MC5, all that stuff out of Detroit, which was kind of doing the same thing musically, but without the fashion.
And now I'm ready to close my mind. And now I'm ready to feel your hand.
What about you know, Bernard and Ian? What were they sort of bringing to the table when you first sat around and started playing each other's records and listening to music together, which I guess you do when you form a band to make sure you're on the same playing field?
Like I speak for Bernard. With Bernard, I mean, we both had the same interests, which was heavy metal. It was Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple, things like that. It was only when Ian came along, and it was Ian before Stephen, that introduced us to like Kraftwerk and Iggy, Lou Reed, and this group called The Doors, who everybody said we sounded like. And Bernard and I had never heard The Doors, which we were going, who are the bleeding Doors? Who's this Doors? And it was amazing now to think that me and Bernard hadn't heard of The Doors, which was a bit strange, but I suppose maybe in one way it's quite nice that you evolved without it all. Yeah. And maybe you sowed the seeds for your first blooming without it. But I mean, it was great. It was an absolute fantastic revelation. And when, like Steve, when we started getting to John Cale, stuff like that, you know, it was a great musical education. Out of all
the influences that you guys have given us for this show, if I could put them all in the same room, I think probably the only one that they'd all probably be tempted to agree on would be David Bowie, who probably is one of the greatest of all storytellers, and you know, I think he's the master of. He's got an unquenchable thirst for reinvention.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's like a good thing and a bad thing, but he continues to do it. I mean, in the early 70s, I mean, Bowie was it, really, from like Hunky Dory was sort of like one thing, nice poppy thing, and then Ziggy Stardust was like a concept album almost.
Diamond Dogs, I thought.
Diamond Dogs, yeah.
But when you guys were actually getting it together, he was actually in Berlin sobering up, you know, with Brian Eno working on the trilogy of records, which some would, you know, arguably say was his best work. You know, he was working on, you know, Low Heroes, and then he went to New York and he did Lodger. The use of electronics was causing a real stir amongst the purists, you know, at the time, and it was also causing a stir in your recording studio, from what I can tell. You weren't too keen on what your engineer was doing with your debut album.
Well, it wasn't the engineer.
No, it was Martin.
It was the producer. I mean, the thing is we'd been through. I don't know. I suppose that's the first frustration as a musician. Is the very first time we got Ideal for Living, when we recorded it, and the guy was playing it really loud in the studio, and we thought, wow, that sounds fantastic. And then we put 4 tracks on a 7-inch EP, and I mean, you had those disappointments all the way. I mean, the thing is, it's a very difficult thing to decide whether, if you want it exactly how you perceive it, if Unknown Pleasures had came out exactly how we perceived it, whether it had had the lasting effect that it has had.
How much of an influence was what Bowie was doing at the time, was he having on your music at that stage? Were you listening?
I can't remember, to be honest.
Well, I can.
What we were doing.
Because we're going back to when we did an Ideal for Living, which was like low. Come out, you always playing low. Go in there and say to this engineer, can you make the snare drum sound like it does on low? And go, oh yeah, of course I can. And it's like, oh, that's not it. No, it goes clang.
That's what it does on my copy.
Yeah, everything does. But
Martin was a great man for having an answer for everything, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Fix it in the mix. We'll fix it in the mix.
Yeah.
It was around the sort of time that New Order really started to happen, and people kind of embraced synthesizers in the 80s, that people really believed that Bowie actually fell off. Do you know what I mean? And actually lost his way. I sort of think that's kind of ironic, the fact that, you know, you guys actually started to make headway using electronics, and whereas when he was kind of doing it, people were just going, what are you doing? What planet are you on? Do you know what I mean? You know, have you noticed the irony in that?
I can't say that I have, really. I mean, because Bowie, it was like it was Bowie and Kraftwerk hanging out in Berlin, and like Heroes, Zeno and Robert Fripp and all, you know, those guys who were using electronics, I think it's great. I don't think anything. There's not been another Heroes since.
New sensation, a fabulous creation, a danceable solution to teenage revolution.
Before that infamous trilogy of Bowie albums, Brian Eno was an important member of seminal glam band Roxy Music, and you know, he was the sort of dramatic, glamorous, androgynous sort of, you know, experimental member, probably a little bit too important, which is why he only lasted about 2 or 3 years, and Brian Ferry told him to piss off.
You can have 2 Brians in the same
I think
band.
he actually told Brian Ferry to piss off.
Did he? Was it the other way around?
I think it was the other way around, but I mean, that first Roxy Music album
was first 2, really.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think,
It's that period of Roxy Music that makes it onto this list, that's the Eno period specifically.
Because like the first album that I had, For Your Pleasure, was just like brilliant. Never heard anything like it before.
Strange thing is, though, I went to see Brian Ferry recently, and he must have played like over half of For Your Pleasure. Not For Your Pleasure, what's the first one called?
Roxy Music.
Half of that LP.
Does he do In Every Dream, Home or Heartache?
No, he didn't do that one.
Oh, I like that
the
one.
second one.
I like that one.
He did 2HB and all
2HB,
that.
I like that one.
And it was unbelievable to see this like orchestra playing that first Roxy Music album. And I must admit the bass player was just as good as theirs. And all the crowd felt cheated because they wanted Brian Ferry.
To come out there and do his crooning and his sort of like, you know,
and I was going, wow,
torch singer.
I never expected this in Tapton Park, you know what I mean? At a picnic.
A picnic gig,
It was fantastic. I was over the moon, me playing Roxy Music.
You've had your fair share of producers and you've had a good pick of them, you know, you've worked with people like Stephen Hague and Flood and, you know, and this time you decide to work with Steve Osborne. What kind of role does a producer play in the recording studio when you're making a New Order record?
Refereeing.
Different refereeing usually, yeah.
I mean, I must admit that Steve Osborne's been the first producer that I've actually worked with that I've actually been happy with, that I felt I could click. I mean, Stephen Hague was a fantastic producer, but I never really clicked with what he was doing. And some of the other ones I've had really bad clicks with them. Some of our other producers. But no, I mean, I think it's just, as you get older and you get a bit more patient, I think you're more willing, or some of us are more willing to take on what other people think.
Daniel, I always have trouble saying Daniel Lanois and Brian Eno are two, you know, very famous producers who've come together and worked on some pretty.
They've always been booked up whenever we try.
But here we go. You know, I'm surprised you haven't worked.
So they say.
You know,
I think we frightened them. We frightened them.
Possibly. I mean,
we waited for ages for that Eno to turn up in Ibiza.
Is that
When's
true?
When's he coming?
Is that true?
It's probably still
It was, yeah, one of the legends, yeah.
Go on, break it down. This is what this show's all about. What's the story? You were going to work with him.
We'd always wanted to work with Eno for some stuff that he did, and he was either not available or he's working on, you know, oblique strategies. So we said, oh yeah, we want to do technique, yeah, we'll get Eno in. And it was like, oh, he'll be here next week. And then, oh no, he'll be here next week. And it never happened. It was for what, probably nobody ever asked Eno.
You're right, never even got to him.
Never even got to him.
I did get the feeling though after I heard his lecture in the City, and after listening to him talk for that long, he did seem a bit more spiritual than nuts and bolts type thing. I think he's like a bit more like that. I mean,
I'm glad you say that because, you know, to me, you know, whenever I talk about, you know, he's you know, seemingly studied music and its texture, you know, it's with such depth that he's become like a registered cliche. You know, you're getting all Eno on me here. You know what I mean?
I could imagine him sitting in a studio and taking your snare drum apart and, you know, beefing it up and stuff like that. I can imagine him sort of doing something afterwards, but I don't know what. Sort of a bit like witchcraft, maybe.
What about you? Do you believe that music, you know, has to be studied as a craft as much as it has to be felt?
I've never studied anything in my life.
So it's safe to say that neither of you can read music?
That would be very safe to say that, yeah.
I can with like most people can read a French menu.
Right. Cool.
Barney was taking a piss out of me last night when we started that jamming thing with, you know, when they go round it, thing, and he went, it's in G, okay. And I went, oh, where's that? And I mean, I do know where it is really, and he showed me A, and I went, you bastard.
Glad and relieved that you've included, you know, Joy Division on this list, because it saves me asking the question, why didn't you include Joy Division on this list? But I can ask the question, why did you pick Atmosphere specifically?
It's just my favourite song of all time, and I saw the film 24 Hour Party People the other night. We saw the first film about us, and it was probably the second most weird experience I've ever been through in my life. The other one was going back to the Hacienda after they'd rebuilt it for a Hacienda night, and I thought the Joy Division section of it was really, really powerful and very disturbing. And I don't know whether I was being a bit tender about it or whatever. But when Atmosphere came on, you know, I mean, it almost broke my heart again. And it was the strangest thing in the world. When I didn't choose it there because I'd seen the film, I chose that before I saw the film. But that brought it home that Atmosphere is a fantastic song, and it'll be at my funeral.
Let's put this to bed somewhat. If Ian had decided to stay on this planet, do you think that Joy Division would have lasted, or do you think there's always going to be something in the way? Now you've had the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah, I think we would, because like Ian, like Joy Division was the most important thing one of the most important things in his life. And I think if he had have stayed with us, he'd probably have carried on and become kind of a bit like what New Order are now, but with a twist.
I still think Ian's with us all the time anyway. I still feel it, and if anything, as corny as it sounds, I think he's more with us now with this LP that we're doing than before, I think, you know.
Was it a tough decision to continue? Obviously not as Joy Division.
It was the easiest thing in the world, actually, to continue. Everybody thought it wasn't.
His decision was easy. The actual practicalities of it were a bit difficult.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
Well, obviously, you know, a band that helped you get through those practicalities and actually disassociate yourself to a certain extent from what you've done in order to create a new beginning for yourselves as New Order and make new music under different guys, was Kraftwerk. As influential, I think, on New Order, must be as influential on New Order as, say, the Sex Pistols were, you know, was on the forming of your first band. You know, it's probably a good time to tip your hat for these guys.
Without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, it's quite funny because the greatest thing about Kraftwerk was, I mean, we devoured them once.
Yeah.
Steve and Ian had introduced Bernard and I to Kraftwerk. You absolutely, literally devoured it right the way through. You know, you eagerly awaited every single thing that Kraftwerk did. And I thought the best compliment as a band member that I'd ever had was after we'd finished Blue Monday.
That's right, when they did Tour de France.
Yeah, Kraftwerk heard it, and they actually booked into Britannia Row with our engineer because they wanted their next record to sound like Blue Monday, and that was like, yes!
That's a moment, isn't it, though?
Yeah, they couldn't do it,
They couldn't do it.
They said that because they actually said to Michael Johnson, our engineer, how the hell did they do it? This is ridiculous. I think they actually stormed out in the end because Brit Row they just thought was a pile of shite, which it was. Yeah.
And how much of Blue Monday would you credit to Kraftwerk? How much of writing that tune yourselves would you?
Not really, it was mainly Steve and Bernard.
Yeah, there's kind of like, indirectly, it's like Kraftwerk influence, like disco that was happening at the time, like Sylvester in America. And the idea behind it was like we were going to write this. We're creating a Frankenstein monster of a track because we always got slated for not doing encores. So we'll write a track that we can just go on and press a button and we can walk off and then we'll just have this. I mean, it didn't happen like that, but that was like a bit behind it, and we had this drum machine in a sequence, and just, a bit of Kraftwerk in there.
Those who came before me lived through their vocation. From the past until completion, we'll turn away no more.
I thought the most hilarious thing in that film, funnily enough, 24-Hour Party People, was when Alan said to Tony, this Blue Monday we're putting out, it's actually costing us, they say 5p, but it was actually 10p more than we're earning on each record. And Tony went, well, don't worry, it's New Order, they won't sell any anyway. I thought that was like someone giving you a loaded gun for Russian roulette and there being 6 bullets in it, you know.
Well, after Blue Monday, on paper, throwing a nod the way of Frankie Goes to Hollywood may surprise a few die-hard New Order fans, but I got to say, here's a band, in my opinion, who smelt revolution in the clubs, right? And they had the ability to bring it to the masses. And if anything, it was the T-shirts and the press that overshadowed the tunes, which I always thought were funky as all hell and always said something. Do you know what I mean? I think they were a very underrated band, personally.
To me, they were like Scouse Sex Pistols at that time, with the way that felt. I mean, I know it was very produced with Trevor Horn, but I did see, I could see that there was something irritating about them, as Scousers always are.
Hey man, I'm a neutral observer.
Joke, it was a joke. I did like it. I liked the bigness of it. It was really, wow, you know, it's something like, maybe that's something like New Order. If they'd done a video at Blue Monday and we'd have done it like that, then you could have been like, God forbid. But I did like the over-the-topness, the gayness of it, you know, it was great. Shout it loud and proud.
Exactly, Relax is definitely a song. I mean, they were my first artistic controversy growing up. They're the first real controversy that I saw in my time that was such a huge deal, and you've got to own this record because everyone's talking about it.
It's a fantastic record, though.
You know, I think it's a brilliant record.
Yeah.
I think it stands up to this day. Relax specifically is just one of those tunes, isn't it, that kind of just, you listen to it and all of a sudden you're dancing in a really stupid way, thinking of a certain time in your life. I mean,
as much as you say, it's kind of sexy. I never thought Blue Monday was sexy. No. Powerful, but not, you know.
Relax, don't do rest when you wanna go to rest. Relax, don't do rest when you wanna come.
what goes through your mind when you hear Relax now? When you're sitting there listening, I mean, is there a time and a place? Can you think of a specific club or where you were at a certain time when you were?
Funnily enough, all the clubs we used to go to then were like that.
Yeah, they were all like that.
That one in Leicester Square.
Taboo.
Taboo, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
every club you used to go to at that time was like, every club we used to go to, because they were mainly gay clubs. Most of our friends who did a lot of our promotion were gay, and they used to run Heaven. So we used to go down there like true Manx because you got in for nothing and got free drinks. So you sort of, you know, you're introduced to it quite nicely. I mean, I thought the atmosphere at all those clubs was electric, much more electric than any straight club could ever be. And I must admit that was one thing that I think that New Order and Rob Gretton and Factory Records did give the world, was a sexy straight nightclub.
Yes, the Hacienda. You know, there's the start of a scene right there, and I mean, you were right there at the beginning and a huge part of kicking it all off. And as has been said, it wasn't always the hit club that it turned out to be, was it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could safely say it was about 5 years ahead of its time, which was a bit of a problem because we were just talking there about the walk of shame, as Steve said, when you used to go to the bar.
It was 5 years of keeping an empty club open, which most people wouldn't do.
Yeah.
How do you survive?
We just had to give it all our money.
Threw more money at it.
Yeah.
So what's the turning point?
It was sort of like the acid house thing and like warehouse parties that kind of made big spaces ran with people hot off the noodles on something or other. That's something. Well, hang on, we've got the Hacienda. That's a bit like that. And yeah, I think that was kind of the turning point when dance and big spaces collided.
Yeah, I mean, it was you have to put it down to Ibiza. We went to Ibiza in '88, and the whole thing was just starting. And Happy Mondays, when we phoned them up and told them how great it was, Ibiza, come on, we've got our own villa and everything, it's fantastic. They all came over and they just took it straight back. They took, you know, that thing that we had in Ibiza, they took it back to Manchester.
How did you feel, you know, when the Hacienda was finally pulled down?
I started the bulldozer, actually. Pulled it down. And I don't know, I mean, the funny thing was, it was absolutely frighteningly, completely out of control at the end, in a way that you could never describe to anybody. I mean, you were actually physically looking down the barrel of a gun most of the time, and if it wasn't somebody dying from ecstasy, then it was somebody dying from bloody gang warfare. And, you know, the last thing I need in my life is to be woken up on a Saturday night at 3 o'clock in the morning saying one of the bouncers had been shot.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the Hacienda is that, like, I'm a strong believer in things having a place and a start and an end.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that it ended.
In Pulp, we have one of the most determined, stubborn and interesting bands of all time, I reckon. They've been around almost as long as you guys have, and they share very similar influences, and I know this because Jarvis was a guest on the show a couple of weeks back. What is it about Pulp?
To be quite honest, I never knew I liked Pulp. I didn't, because the reason, this is stupid, the reason that I got into Pulp was thanks to the random button on my car CD player.
Right.
What a Pulp record, like, you just play the first 3 tracks. And you think, they're good, yeah, I like, yeah, they're alright, they're great. And then I had a different class in my stereo for ages, and I never got to the end of it. And I discovered this random button. I'm going on, and this track comes on, and I thought, this is a Cam track, I've never heard this. This is brilliant. who's this? And then blow me down if it wasn't Pulp. I really like that when like you can be surprised by something.
I agree.
Yeah, it's one of those sort of moments. Yeah, the thing that kind of bums me out a little bit about the music industry in this day and age, with you know the rags, and there's so much of an outlet to create new trends and so forth, is that people are always trying to predict what's coming next. And I'm like you, I like to be surprised.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I really like the new single.
I do. You know, I loved the way that Jarvis did it on Ant and Dec last week when he got up. It looked like he'd been up all night, and he got up and he sang Trees live, right? And it was absolutely bobbins, and it reminded of us on
That's
top of
what
the
we
pops.
do.
I thought, my God, that is so. And Ant and Dec were going, well, that was great. And he was awful. I mean, the song's good. It's a great record. I mean, I like Pulp because they're very English. I like the Kinks.
Yeah, they are.
Kinks versus Stones thing. I really like the Englishness of it.
Do you remember the first time? I can't remember the Warsaw. But you know that we changed so much since then. Oh yeah.
It took Pop 17 years to attain commercial success. Would you guys have stuck it out for 17 years in the same way? If you had to?
We've never really cared about commercial success, to be honest with you. We did everything in our power to make sure we didn't have it. Blue Monday, you know, you never putting singles on records. You know, it was the same thing with autographs. You didn't do autographs for years because you felt they were silly.
So if not commercial success, what is the New Order definition of success when you sit down and go, good work, fellas?
I think we've done fantastic with this record, and I think the hard thing is that, or for my mind, is juggling the amount of work you put into the record against the amount of work you expect out of the record, and that's where people's minds differ. But I think that we've made great music again, and that's what I'm really happy about. I really am happy about the feel of it, and when we play it live, I'm very happy about the way the music feels. And you know, if nothing else happened, at least I'm over the moon with that, Brian.